examine this?
I think we can just go through them sequentially. They're all part of a package, but I think just any order, the order that it's in here is fine.
Okay, why don't we do introductions first?
Tony Kilduff, Council Central Staff.
Dan Eder, Council Central Staff.
Jorge Carrasco, Seattle City Light.
Phil Leiber, Seattle City Light.
Ethan Rupp with the Mayor's Office.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining us too, Ethan. So on the resolution, I guess we'll just take it in sequential order. Tony, you want to introduce the matter a little more clearly?
Yes, this resolution is establishing new financial policies to complement the rate stabilization fund that we're going to speak about shortly. You have two versions in your notebook. The yellow, or Martha Lester was here, she'd tell me exactly what color this is. Version on top is the marked up version of the original that just recognizes that we had started out with this resolution speaking about a revenue stabilization account within the City Light Fund. There's a bit of a history here. We discovered that indeed there was already a rate stabilization fund in existence established by bond ordinance in 2004, and our law department advised us that it would probably be confusing to have two separate accounts within City Light to deal with the same kind of issue. And so that led us to do a new ordinance or new council bill to deal with that, and we'll be looking at that later on. But since the resolution that we'd introduced spoke of a revenue stabilization fund as opposed to revenue stabilization account as opposed to a rate stabilization account, we needed to make some amendments to it. And those amendments are just to clarify that we're working with an existing account that was already established. We took the opportunity to, and this was in consultation with law, to rework some of the recitals so that it was clear that the rate stabilization account had already been established and what its purpose was. So these are just sort of technical edits, technical changes to the legislation that are just in here for your reference. So other than that, I think the substantive pieces of it we had discussed at the previous meeting and everybody was comfortable with it. The 1.8 debt service coverage, the 60-40 split on the average of capital expenditures over the 6-year CapEx program. So debt to equity in effect. And then finally, the commitment in the resolution to come back and revisit all the financial policies again at the end of 2011. Because this is sort of a new venture for us in our effort to stabilize the wholesale revenue swings that we've seen. So everything else is the same. It's just sort of clarifying the existence of the rate stabilization fund and changing the name from revenue stabilization account to rate stabilization account.
Tony, I got a quick question here. On Section 3, where the City Light will fund capital improvements over a 6-year average, with 40% of expenditures coming from cash, with cash from operations. How does that compare to what we've done in the past?
It's approximately the same. We had a debt capitalization ratio target level for the actual annual expenditures each year. That was in effect, I can't remember what it was. It was 55%? Yeah, 55%. This is looking at an average over the 6-year capital program. I think the case that I made the last time was that, you know, the capital program tends to be lumpy. SPU is going through this right now as it's lidding some of the reservoirs. City Light will go through it in the future when it starts to take on some of the relocations for the Alaska Way Viaduct and for, you know, other transportation things. Also the boundary relicensing, once we figure out what exactly that is, it will be lumpy. So one of the changes that I wanted to make here was that we target an average over the 6-year capital program so that we kind of establish a long-term goal and worry less about the individual years and more about trying to establish some sort of long-term strategy of issuing about 60% debt for the capital program.
If we were to look 6 years past, would we have 40%?
You mean 7 years ago?
No, it was the average of the last 6 years, yeah. last
Oh,
6
so if you
years.
average the last 6 years.
I don't think so, because I think we've just the last 6 years included the post-energy crisis period when debt was up around about 85%. So we're down now, or at least before this year.
Jorge,
we're
do you
down.
know?
So beginning in 2003 and then in the subsequent years, we were paying off debt at a very high rate. Debt that had been accrued during the energy crisis of 2000 and 2001. So I think we're pretty close to the 60-40 relationship that we're talking about over that span of time. But right now, if you ask me what is our debt to capitalization ratio, it's probably running around 63%. So if you average those numbers over the last 6 years, it's going to be higher than 60%, but trending in the direction of 60%. We just have moved quicker in the last several years in order to get down to 60. We started 2004 with 85% debt to capitalization.
Which, if my math is right, does that mean then 15% was from cash?
Yes.
Okay.
So on average, as we were making improvements, we were borrowing 85 cents of every dollar and funding only 15 cents of every dollar we were investing in capital at
Okay,
that
and-
time.
And that was through a rough period. I guess I just want to find out whether this is realistic. That's what I'm.
Oh, it's definitely realistic. There's no reason in principle why we couldn't get there and stay there, particularly on an average 6-year basis.
Okay, and so then if we're not there now, and the 6-year plan is issued every biennium, I believe.
Every year.
It is every year, okay. Doesn't it track our budget process?
Yeah, every year you will adopt the budget and you'll adopt.
Well, we adopt a biennium
yeah,
budget, so.
Yeah, but you also endorse by implication, you endorse the 6-year capital program, and you actually adopt the funding for the first year of that, which is always the current year of the budget.
So the plan gets refreshed
It gets
every year.
refreshed, just like the budget gets, I mean, the beginning of the 2-year cycle, generally you lay out the CIP and then you make some adjustments in the second half, the second year, but for the most part, it's a couplets, 2 years. So what happens 2 years from now and we're lower than the 40%? I mean, I don't see a corrective mechanism in here. This is just sort of a guidance statement, so this way we could take a look at it and say,
Correct.
hey, we're not meeting our goal, have, someone come in here and talk to us about it and then just move on. And that's just fine. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's the expectation.
There is no specific corrective mechanism in here for it, and I'm not sure you really want to. This is aspirational. The other piece of this that I spoke to at the previous meeting is that there is obviously an interplay between the debt service coverage and the contributions to the capital program, because the coverage the extra coverage over and above 1.0 is in fact what goes to the capital program. So at some point or other, what we will need to do is to take a look at whether the 1.8 over the long haul, given the assumed capital program for the next 5 to 10 years, is consistent with the 60-40 split. And I've suggested to City Light, and we will be doing this through the strategic planning process, that we should take a look at those financial dynamics and see if we're aiming for a 60-40 split and we know what our capital program looks like, what would the debt service coverage need to be in the long run to support that. So that's the reason, in fact, that we have Section 4 in here, where it talks about revisiting all of these financial policies at the end of 2011. Right now, the critical thing is to get the financial policies established, to get the revenue stabilization or rate stabilization account up and running, and get the debt issuance taken care of. And then I think when we've had a year or a year and a half to look at how this works, we should come back and visit it again.
So, to be the devil's advocate, so we have our aspirational goal is to have a DSC of about 1.8, but let's say, okay, under no circumstances do we want a rate